Hey everybody. All right, so today I'm going to do a little bit of a deep dive into one of my favorite establishments to visit, arcade food and entertaining. So, anytime I can go to Dallas, I go to this little place called Cidercade. I absolutely love it. It's got a lot of different types of games, and you pay a flat rate to get in the door, and you just have fun. Sometimes for me, for hours, I can spend a whole day in this arcade. And anytime I can find like an old timey arcade, like there's one in Murfreesburg, Tennessee, I absolutely love going there too. So I thought this would be a fun industry to do a deep dive into and see if it's one that I would want to own, not just visit as a client. So I'm going to do a little bit of a deep dive with you. All right. So what is a food and entertainment business? So these are commercial buildings for people to gather for entertainment purposes. They tend to have food and arcades, laser tag, bowling, mini golf, whatever the entertainment might be. Each one is a little different. I'm actually going to have to make this a little bigger so I can look at you. Let's move me here. Is that going to work that way? I don't know. We're going to find out. All right. So barriers to entry, there's a high cost to be able to start one of these establishments. You have to pay for the real estate, you have to pay for all of the machines, you have to pay for labor. High cost. It might be easier to buy one than build one. I'm not sure on that, but because I haven't done like a price cost analysis or anything of that nature. But I would definitely think these are hard companies to maintain. Okay. And then you have to deal with licensing and regulations. If you have food, there's more regulations. If you have alcohol, obviously there's a lot more regulations. So it just kind of depends on what you want it to look like. And said the one in Murfreesburg is definitely a gem in the United States that I have traveled from Atlanta to go see, literally just this arcade. And I don't think they have food or alcohol. They just have video games. And then Cidercade, I don't know if they have alcohol, but I do know the only food they have is in a vending machine because I've been there long enough to be hungry and go hunt for food, and the only options are in a vending machine. And so a lot of these small mom and pop shops usually don't do the food or alcohol, but then you have places like Dave and Buster's who do alcohol and don't allow kids, right, after a certain hour. So it really just depends on how it's created, how it's set up, who's running it, all of these different factors, alrighty? Next are some examples. I just gave you a lot of examples actually, but here are some big names. You have Chuck E. Cheese, which unless they added alcohol recently, when I've went, I don't remember ever seeing alcohol, but I don't drink, so I'm not really a good tell sign on whether Chuck E. Cheese offers alcohol or beer or wine or any of that nature. But I do know Dave and Buster's has always been known to be a food and alcohol kind of place. I'm pretty sure I've had people with me at Topgolf who've eaten and drank alcohol. Andretti's, I don't really know. I know that they have arcades. I know that they have bowling and go-karts and things. So, each one has its own little spin on what their offerings are going to be. And then a couple of trends. So it really just depends. There's so many different variations inside this genre. What I've seen lately, though, is that they tend to focus more on nostalgic video games. Things like Pac-Man. You tend to see air hockey. But it really comes down to how that business is created and who their clientele is, right? Things like Chuck E. Cheese is not going to pull in the same type of customer as Dave and Buster's, right? So Chuck E. Cheese is a kid's place. Dave and Buster's may be more of an adult place. And so if their focus is on adults, they tend to have more nostalgic type games. One of the other trends that I'm seeing is price to get in the door, not just price per ticket. It also depends, Chuck E. Cheese has a lot of prizes associated, and so then that tends to be pay for this card. This card lets you play games, and things of that nature. Very, very rarely will you see cost per game and it be quarters like it was back in the olden times, right? But a couple of things to think about in this business is the disposable income of the area is super, super important. This company is probably going to get hurt by an economic downturn. Demographics of the area is very important. If you live in a rural town, you're likely to get less traffic than if you live in downtown Atlanta, right? And profit margins tend to be less than 10%. So you really got to be pulling in some money to be making money in this industry, right? So let's do some quick math. If you're doing $1 million in sales, okay, times 10%, you got $100,000 profit. Well, that's not a lot. That means to make good money as an owner, you want to be doing $2, $3, $5 million a year. And that can be quite a feat since most businesses don't hit that $1 million mark, right? So just some things to think about in this industry. Okay, here are some specific questions to ask when you are looking at buying an arcade. So the lease of the building, this, tends to be in a brick and mortar location. It's hard to do video games without a brick and mortar location. However, I would think those vans with the PlayStations, like the little travel vans are set up cool for teenagers. I would think that they fall into this, but it's still assets that you're owning, even though that particular item's not a piece of commercial real estate. It's a trailer, which would be an asset. So you got to figure out, is the asset owned? Is it commercial real estate? Is it owned? Is it leased? How much is it to cover the real estate or the asset for ownership? And what are the terms, right? And then ask about area demographics, disposable income, age, lifestyle. A funny story, which, I'll probably talk about often, is a friend of mine owns a company in a neighboring town. And we asked my now 10-year-old what he thought the demographics of her clients would be in this other town. Let me just tell you, he got it spot on. In this industry, you got to have that kind of accuracy. You really want to be spot on. You want to make sure that the people that live around this establishment can pay and have that disposable income to be able to be a client, right? And then the machines. The machines have their own whole life, right? Like it's the whole beast of its own. You've got to deal with, do they own or lease the machines? What's the service terms look like? Like, what happens if a machine breaks down? Are you going to fix it? Is the manufacturer going to fix it? What happens? Because I'm telling you, some of these machines are probably older than I am, and technology may not last that long. So you've got to make sure that the upkeep and the cost of the upkeep is already talked about before you get into one of these businesses. All right, so what about the financials? Do they have a seasonality to their books? Are their books clean? If your books aren't clean in this business with the 10% profit margin, I would probably walk away because you can look like you're making a lot of money, but doesn't mean you're making any of it. And the other piece that tends to be asked on all of mine is, what is the marketing mix? How are you getting your clients? Where are they coming from? How long are they staying? What is the cost to acquire a client? What does all that look like? It's very, very important to ask with the fact that these margins are so low. And then the evaluation. As I've said several times in this video, there are so many different variations of this type of business that it can be really hard to come up with an evaluation. Lots of factors to consider for each specific business, but a few of those may include the status of the machines. Are they owned? Are they rent? What's the upkeep of the machines? What's the commercial real estate look like? The location, demographics of the area, the same thing I've already talked about. These businesses are just really, really hard with a high failure rate. So while I love the idea of having a local arcade with like Pac-Man and Skee-Ball and all these great, awesome, fun games, I don't think it's a business I want to buy. So let's talk a little bit about the clients. So, as I said, it really varies based on what type of company it is. Some want kids, some have focus on families, and some are adults and drinking. It just really depends on how they set up their business. But can your ideal client afford the cost of this service? Yeah, given you're in the right location, the economy is good, your clients can afford it. It's a relatively low cost. I think Cidercade, I spent 10, $20 for the whole day. Whereas if I take my kids, 4 kids to Cidercade, it might be $100. If I take 4 kids to Chuck E. Cheese for a few hours, it might be $100. right? And so for some families, that's a really great price point for something fun to go do. But if you can't pay your rent, you're not going to spend that $100 to go play, right? Strong client retention. How? Like, I mean, I could see them doing like a monthly membership of like $20 a month, $100 a month, unlimited play or whatever, right? That tends to be a big thing. But other than that, there's no real client retention. There's no contracts. It's really hard to predict day to day what your sales are going to look like. And it's hard to target. Let's talk about what the marketing on something like this might be. You might be doing like the ads in front of the movie theaters, or you may be doing social media. Social media will probably be a huge piece of this because it's such a social place to go to show photos and videos of people out having fun. I think will be a huge piece of this marketing. Paid ads, probably promotions just to get people in the door, giveaways, $10 for you when you spend $100, or things of that nature. The gimmicky types pitches may work well. Get involved in the community. I know I've watched Urban Air when they first come out. They put their company on the local Boy Scout card, like the discount card that you can buy. And I watched their business blow up and do really well. So if you can find something that you can do like that to give back to the community in such a way, it could really seek high benefits for you, particularly in this type of niche if you're targeting children. Now, if yours is all about adults only and alcohol, going that route may not work, right? And so you've got to figure out how you're going to target which specific part of the market you're going to go after, and then how you want to set up that marketing. So are they easy to target? Is it like a group of realtors? No, but the marketing there is definitely possible, and lots of different options and flexibility you can find. And then are the clients in pain? No, there's no pain. They're here to have fun, and so there's no real pain point. There's no real need for the service. And so that alone can make it a really hard business to survive in economic downturns. All right, so one of my favorite things to do when I look at businesses or industries is doing the SWOT analysis. Is let what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, what are the opportunities, what are the threats, what are the things that you might need to do to make this business work, and what types of strengths and weaknesses are going to fit with your personality, right? So, some of the strengths is this is a very social setting. It brings up a lot of nostalgia, brings up a lot of family and happy memories for people, and because you can do the video games and the food and the alcohol, and you could do parties and you could do bowling or go-karts or golf or whatever, it gives you a lot of ways to bring in money. So it's got a diverse stream of possible income. But some of the weaknesses, it's a high overhead. You've got lots of machinery, you've got the real estate, so there's lots of things on that front to worry about. And it could be considered a dying business, right? Like, that could be hit and miss because in the 80s, before we had video games to play in our house as readily as we do now, I could see the arcade being way more busy than it is now. But is it dying? I don't know. Only time could tell. Opportunities. So you could be putting in new tech, esports, competitive gaming. So really the opportunities lie in bringing in new technology. And if your business plan is set up in a way that you could embrace new technology, embrace the cost of new technology. And then you've got a lot of threats in this industry. You've got home gaming. You have these mobile gaming trucks that come to kids' houses for birthday parties. Economic downturns could destroy this business. You've got high competition, and then those machines break. So you've got high cost for maintaining it as well. So there's lots of negatives in this business. However, man, I wish there was one close because I love them. Is this simple? Yeah, it's pretty simple. You take a quarter, you put it in the machine. You take some money, you put it in the machine, you get a card, you put the card in the game, and you play, right? So it could be a pretty simple business to run. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out how an arcade works, so that's going for it. is this an old and proven business? Yes, video games started really in the 70s and 80s. Like my notes say it started in the 1940s and 50s as the original pinball games. But in the 70s and 80s, it was the hot item. It was the place to hang out, the place to be, the place to be seen. And then as home gaming started to pick up in the 80s and 90s, it started to slow down. And then 2000s, arcades went through some adaptation and they changed what they were doing. And now you have the new barcades, the VR and other high-end experiences into today. And the barcade is like, those old-timey video games with like cider or a brewery or alcohol somehow attached. But the name of it's barcades. And then, you have the VR and all the high-end tech that's coming in that people don't necessarily have in their house. That is a novelty experience for people. But overall, the business and, arcades have been around for a long time. So it is an old and proven model. But is it dying? That's questionable. Depends on who you ask. Instead, there's lots of competition and lots of home video games and alternatives to going to arcades nowadays. All right. Does it meet a need? Does pain exist? No, we've already talked about that. Does it meet a financial need? No. Does it hit a relationship need? No. Does it hit a health need? No. So there is absolutely no need for this business. It is pure fun and enjoyment. So when the economy shrinks, this market will shrink. And with margins of less than 10%, I would hate to have one of these businesses and have an economic downturn. That's for sure. All right. Can we add contractual elements? Maybe a monthly membership. Any specializations, barrier to entry? Not really. There may be some special knowledge for the machinery, but the biggest barrier to entry is the high cost. All right. The most exciting part is exiting. So, in my research, I found that these businesses are easier to acquire than to start. And just because the overhead's so high, you have a lot of unknown variables if you start this business. Whereas if you buy this business, you are buying a proven track record. You can see what the trends and what the numbers are looking like and all of that detail. And so you definitely want to start with the end in mind if you buy or start one of these businesses. Once you do, you can resell or you can franchise. In fact, most of the arcades that you know of today are somehow a franchise. Some of them are probably corporate, but most of them are franchises, right? Like I would think Chuck E. Cheese may be a franchise. I think Andretti's is probably corporate or small owned. But anyways, there's a lot of franchises in this space. So it is possible. And that's the end of it. So, no, if you know of anyone who is thinking about selling a business, I would love for you to connect us. I am looking at acquiring a business in 2025 and seeing how this whole process goes. I've been fascinated with buying business for quite some time. I've been doing some research. In 2 weeks, I have a 3-day conference to go learn more about buying business. And I am steadily making these videos to teach you all I know and what I'm learning about different industries as I continue down this journey. So if you know anybody who is thinking about buying a business or selling a business or, any business and help, I would love for you to connect us. Have a great day. Bye.